All right, everybody. Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday night. That means we are here for another weekly episode of Conversations with Cougars. And we are in for a treat. This man, who is my guest, in the last 45 days or less, has won a state title. His soon to be at that time fiance, now bride, graduates college. He gets married. He takes a honeymoon. I'm not sure what he's doing in January or February, but this is a top 10 month, in my opinion. That's awesome. Of course, I've got now offensive line coach for the 6A state champs, former Cougar, always a Cougar, Preston Hatcher. Good evening, Preston. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, as you and I were talking about, you hadn't had the ring ceremony yet. I mean, you have had one, the more important of the two. You had that last month. But when you get that bling for Clay-Chalkville, I want a big picture posted in our group because I want folks to see what a 6A title state champ ring looks like these days. I'm sure it's going to be an awesome. Have you seen any renderings yet?
I have. It looks good. Like I said, I'm excited to get it. I have one from college for the region or the OVC Championship, but I'm excited for this one for sure.
Well, you know, you're going to laugh. If you go into our group, you're going to see the 81 state title ring that JJ Joseph Johnson is wearing. He just joined us. You'll see the 85 ring that I have, and you compare it to the 21 ring. There'll be no comparison what it looks like. And Preston, as folks roll in, we got all kind of Hatchers, as you can imagine.
I'm sure.
We got Stan, we got Laura, and more folks are rolling in. Of course, I've got Preston Hatcher, who was an offensive lineman in the Chip Harris, LeBrian Stewart days. And that's where I want to start, Preston. I know both of those coaches. You had the distinction of playing for both of those coaches. Very, very different personalities, very, very different coaching styles and philosophies. I don't know if it makes a big difference on the offensive line for you about that. Maybe it does in the offensive schemes. But talk about the differences, if you will, a little bit about the two coaches and their philosophies, their styles, and their personalities. Share a little bit about them.
So Chip, yeah, he was a fiery guy. Like I said, I've always had thick skin, so whatever he said, it's almost I knew what I knew how to do. Sometimes I might just go in one ear and out the other, not like a bad way. Like I said, I was probably more hard on myself playing or coaching than most people can be towards you. Coach Stewart was actually my position coach my 10th grade year. Like I said, he was almost like a father figure, you could say. Kind of groomed me up. I remember him taking me to camps. So Coach Stewart's my guy. Like I said, I hadn't seen him in a while. I saw him for my sister's wedding a couple of years ago. And I was actually in his wedding. So,
wow.
Yeah, Coach Stewart, he was one of the best position coaches, if not one of the best I've ever had or been around.
Very good. Well, I want to welcome another awesome coach from the Northview program years. Coach David Ryan has joined us. Good evening, Coach. Thanks for popping in for a few minutes. Preston, let's talk a little bit about being a Cougar and what it meant to you back in the day. And as you get older and now you're coaching in high school and you see the modern athlete, not that you're ancient by any stretch, but it's now been 10 years since high school for you. Talk about being a Cougar, being a 6A Cougar and representing the city of Dothan, representing your high school back then. Did it mean something to you when you were playing? Did it mean something after you graduated?
So I'll kind of preface this was, and you may not know this, I was actually a water boy for Dothan High when I was younger. So growing up, I always wanted to go to Dothan High. So my granddad coached. Of course, I was on for Northview. Like I said, when you're in Dothan, it's kind of like Alabama Auburn. You got to pick one or the other.
That's right.
So of course, I went to Northview. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I made a lot of friends. I mean, it meant a lot. I mean, my 10th grade year, playing football was probably the funnest I've ever had besides this year coaching and winning the state championship. Even in college, I got to play right beside my cousin for, the whole season, which was, like I said, the most fun I've ever had playing football, coaching it, like I said, yeah, playing at Northview, like I said, I wish we could have done better. In my opinion, I think we kind of underachieved my 10th grade year. If you look back at the schedule, there's a lot of close losses that we probably should have won. We went 6-4, probably should have been 8-2, 9-1, to be honest with you. So that kind of still sticks out, kind of bugs at me a little bit. Just knowing that, I never went to the playoffs as a player. But it is what it is. Like I said, as far as, going to different games, a lot of my friends played baseball. I remember going to the basketball games, having fun, going to baseball games. So it was, there was a lot of school spirit. That's something that, that I really cherish. And I, as far as being a Northview Cougar, that was that was fun, kind of being around all the other sports and all the other athletes.
Well, sure. They supported you guys on Fridays, and you repaid it during the different parts of the year, going to basketball games, and I'm sure baseball, whatever other sports that you went to that you had friends playing. Coach Josh Parrish says, "Awesome young man. He's proud of you for what you're doing and what you."
I appreciate it.
Let's talk about that sophomore year. What was so fun about 10th grade in 07 for you?
I think it was because I was, I can remember as me and Chitty, BJ, like we had grown up together, played ball, baseball, football, everything together. And we were like the only 10th graders starting or playing during that year. Like I said, it was just playing beside my cousin, DR. I played left tackle that year. Funny story is after the second or third game, I actually broke my thumb. So I played the whole season with the cast on, which was very hard trying to grab on to those guys on the edge.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you get called for holding much or not so much?
No, I didn't get called for holding. I got a lot of false starts, and like I said, my cousin took up for me. He would just say that he did it, so that I didn't get yelled at. Being a young guy, I was eager to go. Like I said, sometimes I couldn't hold my water. But like I said, yeah, the 10th grade year, it was just, just getting to play like high school football, big stages, you're going to Auburn, Opelika, Enterprise. I mean, you're playing the best, especially at that time. And even now, I mean, those schools are always good, always have good competition. So, you're always going to have to come with it. Just playing beside him, the joke is, we went off bands and like he couldn't read the cards because they were so small. So I'd always have to tell him to play, so if there's any time something was wrong, he just blamed me. He said, well, he told me to do this. So it was a fun time for sure.
That's funny. Now, BJ's been on our show just a few months ago. Take us into a huddle, a BJ Chitty huddle. What was that like?
Well, I guess I really wouldn't know because we didn't. As far as, being on armbands, but I mean, just playing with BJ was awesome. I got a lot of stories with him, either, baseball, basketball, or football.
And we're here for the stories, Preston. So any of them you want to share? I don't know if the statute of limitations is up for most of those that you may be thinking of, but any ones you want to share, we're here for that.
Well, funny one is, I'll tell you, we were, I think in the 8th grade before we went to it was the year before we went to Northview. We're playing like rec ball or travel, some type of baseball. And, BJ was obviously very talented at everything he did. And I remember I was hitting against him and he drilled me right in the back. So I told him after the game, I said, I'm going to be protecting your blind side eventually in the next few years. So you need to probably not do that again.
Yeah, I'm not sure he thought that one through when that ball left his hand, but that's pretty funny. Pretty funny. JJ, Joseph Johnson, sends some love your way. Great athlete, great competitor, great guy, Big Preston. One of Dothan's finest, from one of Dothan's finest families. Love that boy. That's really
I appreciate it.
Coming from JJ. But speaking of your grandfather, of course, Bobby Sermon coached at Dothan High for many years. And for any of you who have any roots to Dothan, and particularly in sports, the Sermon name and the importance and the role that the Sermon family has played in Dothan City sports. I know you said growing up you were a water boy. at Dothan and probably up to a certain time just assumed or thought you'd be going to Dothan High. But at what point did it either dawn on you or you were informed, no, in fact, you're going to the north side of town. You're going to be up at Northview. How did that sink in, if you remember that time period?
I don't particularly remember the time. I just remember I lived on Pontiac, which is right off of Main Street, which I think was the cutoff at the time. It was you either lived on the country club side and you went to Dothan High, or you lived on the side where I lived and you went to Northview. So probably around my seventh grade or so, 7th or 8th grade. I knew I was going to Northview and I was excited. And I believe my 8th grade year, I believe that's when Northview beat Opelika, if I'm not mistaken, like 10-9 or something, and ended the 3 or 4 losing streak or whatever. So
yeah,
I remember at halftime they said the score and we drove up and watched the rest of the game from the parking lot. So that was a exciting time getting ready to start my high school career.
And that was on a Thursday night. And I've interviewed several people who played or were teachers or were part of either cheering or band. They actually treated the next day at school almost like a state championship type atmosphere, because finally the streak was broken. And I bet that made a huge impression on you as well.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that was a game that was moved because of a hurricane or something to the end of the year. And yeah, I mean, that was just like a kind of the new wave, I guess you could say, that things were kind of going to start back on the uptrend with Coach Ayers, and then it followed with Wayne and of course Coach Stewart. So
right. Well, Preston, let's take it to a Friday at Northview, a game day. Now, back in my day, we wore our jerseys. The ball players did. There was probably a theme to the day throughout the school for school spirit. There was a pep rally at the end of the day that kind of sent everybody off for the weekend and getting ready for the game. But that was when I was in school. That was a long time ago. What was a Friday for you guys on a game day when it was a home game?
it was very similar. Jerseys at the school, cheerleaders giving you like goodie bags and candy, whatever it is. Like I said, end of the day, would always have a pep rally that would kind of close the day, and kids would go home after that. Then, like I said, after that, it's personally, I didn't like pep rallies because I never liked to get like too high. Like I was never a kid to get real hyped up, or I always like just kind of business as usual. Of course, we did it. It's more for the student body, I think, anyway. So, like I said, it was fun for them to kind of get them excited to come to the game. But then after that, it was, music in the headphones, taking a nap, whatever it is, kind of start visualizing what I have to do to play well in the upcoming game.
Now, were the pep rallies at the end of the school day, or were they at the beginning of the day?
What I can remember, they were always at the end. And then as soon as they were over, kids just dismissed from the gym and went home. So,
and then did you guys stay at school? Did you have a team meal or go to a movie, or what did y'all do in that 3-hour window before it was time to go to the stadium?
I can remember, I don't know if we did it all my 3 years, but at one point we used to bus to like a local church and eat meals there.
Mm-hmm.
But also I remember people coming in and catering and eating there. So either way we would eat, a couple hours before, get off your feet, some downtime. And after that, it was some sort of like a walkthrough, a run through, maybe like the opening script, some special teams walkthroughs, and you're on the bus by 4:45, 5 o'clock, heading downtown, and those were the longest bus rides from Northview to Riphew's in that 5 o'clock traffic. I would usually take a snoozer.
Well, it seemed like it was a 2-hour ride when in fact it was less than 30 minutes, I'm sure. Now, who's on your playlist back in the day, your Northview days?
A lot of AC/DC, Red Hot Chili Peppers. If I wanted to tone it down, maybe like some Leonard Skinner. So a lot of classic rock. That's my go-to.
And every team has different personalities throughout the team. You've got your rah-rah guys, the hype guys. That's how they get their energy out. Then you've got the really quiet dudes that don't even listen to music. They just kind of stay in their lane, kind of tune everything out. And then most everybody else, I guess, is right in the middle. What I want to ask you, what was the bus ride? You said you usually took a snoozer, but what was the bus ride like leaving campus? Was it a hype bus? Was that one bus and the other bus was quiet bus, or what was going on in the bus most of the time?
Most times, from what I can remember, it was very quiet. Like I said, everybody just trying to get focused, and or at least that's what you hope. Everybody's kind of focused off their phones, not texting, not talking, just kind of thinking what they need to do to get themselves prepared to to be able to play well and be able to execute whatever it's called.
All right, you get to the stadium, and the home locker room was on the left side. If you're looking at the front of the entrance to the stadium, I think that's always been the home side.
Yes, sir.
And when you unloaded, you didn't have on, I assume you didn't have on your top pads, you just had on your pants. Were you walking around? Take us through a little bit of that, because the reason why I'm asking you kind of minute details here, even though I played many years before you and there were other guys after you, we all played at the same stadium. We all went through similar rituals, but we have different experiences. So I'm curious, how did you guys treat, and you big guys on the O-line, you always seem to stay together in your position group. Those are your buddies. But once you got to the stadium, what can you take us through a little bit of that pregame?
So personally, like I said, you walk off, and there might be some fans there, kind of, little Cougar walk or whatever. You put your stuff down, and you kind of walk the field, kind of get your legs back up underneath you. My biggest thing is, I would walk, 100 back, 100 there, just kind of take it in. Like I said, you play there every week, but still, it's just, it's one of the, if not the biggest, just like high school stadiums there still is in the state. Like if you don't count the college bowls and all that things like Montgomery and Birmingham. But my biggest thing is, like I said, walk the field. Knowing me, like I was looking for the play clock, shot clocks, whatever. I'd make sure I knew where all of them were. Just in case. Like I said, really just kind of staying focused, staying locked in. I didn't really run around or do any kind of pre-warm-up stuff. I may have done some stretching, but kind of just everybody just kind of staying together and just kind of talking about what we need to do.
Now I want to pause you right there from a Friday night game. You've now been coaching at Clay-Chalkville up here in the Birmingham metro area, and have you guys played in Dothan? Clay-Chalkville being 6A, Northview, well, I guess now Dothan moving up to 7A now. But did you guys have any occasions to come back or come down to Dothan to play?
Well, funny story is, and so my first year here, which was the first year that the new Dothan school was a 6A, we actually were their first game.
I didn't appreciate that. Where was that game played?
That was we played at Thompson.
That's right. That's right. What was the outcome of that game? I truly don't remember.
We won like 38-14 or something. It was a couple score game. We jumped on them early, and then, like I said, there was actually like a rain delay or a lightning delay. So it was kind of a weird game that was played on a Saturday, which as a high school coach, I do not like, because the next day I was working again. So
right.
But yeah, that was fun getting to play, the new Dothan, being their very first game. And like I said, I just moved from Enterprise to here. So I'd already played Dothan and Northview, for a couple of years, and now I'm in Birmingham and playing them again. So.
Well, even before you got to Clay-Chalkville, when you were in Enterprise, did you play at Rip Hughes during your years? Yes.
So I was there for 3 years. 2 of those years I was the head 9th grade coach. So like I said, we would split playing Northview and Dothan. And then my last year I was the varsity O-line coach. We played, one at home and one back in Dothan. So.
And being on the visitor sideline for a game like that, was it a little disorienting? Or I guess maybe when you were at Northview, you might have played on the visitor side at least one game against Dothan. But still, that's got to be a weird feeling.
Yeah, it was different. You know, I got a lot of feedback of me going to Enterprise. You know, saying I didn't like Enterprise growing up.
Who
know,
did?
From a rivalry standpoint? I don't know who from Dothan does, but I said, you know, when they're paying the bills, you know, it's a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Guys, I'm talking with Preston Hatcher. He's a 2010 Northview graduate, 2011 OVC champ, member of Jacksonville State University, and now a 2021. Not only is he a 6A state champ with Clay-Chalkville, but a newlywed on top of that. Man's having a good year, that's for sure. And I appreciate him taking some time with us. Let's talk about getting in the trenches. What'd you like about playing on the O-line at Northview or even at Jacksonville State?
I mean, the biggest thing is, like, you know, of course, you know, you got the games, you got the high profile stadiums you go to, but like the things I always take away is just like the guys I played with. You know, I'm close with a bunch of guys I played with in college. A lot of them were in my wedding. We talk every day. You know, guys that I played, like I said, my cousin and some of those guys I played with at Northview. Just being, you know, if you think about it, it's the only position group that has 5 or more people on the field at any given time. You know, you may have 5 DBs in a dime package or something, but they're not playing beside each other, having to work as a unit, you know, to move another human being away from where he's trying to go. So that was just fun, you know, just, you know, getting after it. You know, I played tight end in middle school, and then Northview didn't really utilize a tight end. So I was kind of, you know, athletic enough, and I just kind of moved down and played O-line. So like I said, I enjoyed it. You know, like I said, a lot of people kind of, you know, that's as a coach, it's like, well, if you can't play O-line, then the next spot is at the house. Because that's the last, you know, if you're not fast enough, you're not big enough, then the next thing is either you're a manager or you're at the house. Like I said, I enjoyed every bit of it. I enjoy coaching it. Like I said, it's probably I think it's the most important group on the football field.
Well, that's where I was going to head with this. Well, I guess I should ask it to start this way. Which of those 5 positions did you enjoy playing and have the most experience playing?
I would probably say tackle in high school for sure. The reason I say that is I played some tackle scout team in college, and I figured out they're a lot faster in college. So I moved inside the guard and center, which I liked a lot more in college. In high school, I think I started like a handful of games at center. I played both tackles. I never started at guard, but we went through a spring where me and another guy named Bartavius Wiggum, he was about my size at the time. They put him at left tackle, and then they put me at left guard. So, or you know, we would switch guard and tackle. So I've kind of played it all. The most experience in high school, I said, was tackle. But I ended up loving guard probably more than anything, like I said, in college.
What people don't appreciate, but they didn't appreciate back then or way back when, decades ago, but they do now, is it's such a technical position. Each of those 5 positions, your technique, I think, is as important as any other thing that you may bring to the position. Not just size, not just strength, not just quickness, but your technique, whether it's your feet or your hands or your recognition of what's going on in front of you. I don't think people appreciate how cerebral those positions have to be. And talk about center and then move out to the tackles. Take somebody to a line of scrimmage. And what is the center doing? Why is there we see all the pointing, we see all the talk. What is all that about pre-snap?
So, yeah, I mean, as a center, and we didn't do as much of this in high school, but definitely when I got to college, it was a learning curve and learning. So you'll always see them point out is what they call a mic. When a defense draws up their formations, they have a mic linebacker, but according to what the run scheme is or who we're setting to or whatever it may be, we're telling who the quarterback who we're responsible for. So like you said, when and it's how I teach it now. It's kind of next level at Clay is, so we get down and just say for instance, we got, inside zone to the right. Well, you'll see us, depends on if we have a tight end. We'll give them a signal to let them know you got a tight end, so you can declare the mic backside. If there's no tight end, you declare the mic front side. And then that also, from the center standpoint, after you declare the mic, it goes from guard to tackle. So they got to know, if I'm on the backside of the zone with the mics to the right one, if there's two, he's on the right, then me and the tackle are responsible for -1. So it could be different. If he's a shade, the guard's by himself, the tackle's sifting up to the left linebacker. If it's a backside 2 or 3, then there's some type of call where it's a double team where they're working to that D lineman to the linebacker. So there's a lot of pre-snap communication on every single play. And I think that's what's important. Like I stress to my guys, and even when I was playing, is you got to talk every single play. If you're not talking, then something's wrong. It does not matter if you think the defense knows what you're doing.
Yeah.
They have to stop it. Like I said, it's a communication, and it starts with the center. Sometimes you won't have a very smart center, and you have to kind of groom a guard to do it. Somebody on the inside definitely has to kind of take charge, because if you wait for the quarterback to do it, like I said, you're just kind of playing behind the 8 ball.
Well, he's got his own responsibilities. And
That's
if you
right.
have a center or a guard who really is experienced enough and mentally quick enough to be able to call it out, it takes a lot of pressure off of the quarterback. But could you imagine somebody watching our conversation who knows, they think they know football, and hearing you talk about all of this technique and language that's just like, man, you're going to have to explain all that to me, because what people don't appreciate is it's a whole different language. I would love if there would be a way, I don't care if it's high school, college, or pro, where they would just mic up the interior linemen and just talking pre-snap and be able to pull that, rip that audio and have an average person try to decipher. There's no way that they could figure that stuff
So the funny
out.
story is like, so we'll be game planning like on Sundays up here. And so our OC is Joey Bennett. Like I said, awesome guy to work for. He's played or coached in like 12 state championship games. He was a Rush disciple. He was at Hoover and Colquitt. So like I've been lucky enough to be with him for the last 3 years, and he's more run oriented. So like me and him sit in there and kind of come up with what we're going to do for that week. And sometimes even like our head coach come in, we're like, all right, we're gonna run, what we call flag, which is just power. I said, we're gonna run flag. Yeah, we'll ace this, we'll chip that, we'll bounce to this. And sometimes our head coach just kind of looks at us and he just walks out of the room, because like I said, it's a different language when it's like, instead of saying we're going to do this, this, and this, we just kind of start spitting out our calls of what we're visualizing on the whiteboard.
Awesome. Preston, when you were playing at Northview and then later at Jacksonville State, what was your peak? What was your top weight both of those times?
In high school, I probably started out at like 255 as a 10th grader, and then probably left about 285 as a senior. In college, I got up to about 310. And then I kind of cut back down and probably stayed around 300 was when I played.
It's every generation, the athletes are bigger, faster, stronger, each generation next. I outweighed at quarterback in 1985. I was at about 182 to 185 during the season. I outweighed both of my tackles.
Wow.
Now, I will tell you this, they were the quickest 2 tackles in the state, and they protected like no other. They were like wildcats. But our guards and our center were the meat of the line.
Yep.
But now, let's take the O line for Clay-Chalkville this year. Take me from blind side to right side. What was our height and weights across the board?
So I'll say this up front: we were the smallest team that, like, every team that we played, we were the smallest up front, defense and offensive line.
Really? Wow.
Very, very fast. Our defense was, I'm glad that we didn't play them every week because I got tired of playing them in practice. Very, very fast, athletic. So our left tackle, he was probably our biggest guy. He was like 6'2", 265. He was just a freshman.
You started a freshman blindside on a 6A state championship team. That kid's got to have some talent. That's impressive.
He does. Like I said, he's got room to grow. Like I said, you know, I kind of rank him. He was probably like a C+ B. He didn't get you beat. He didn't do anything crazy, but like I said, for a ninth grade lineman, like I said, to me, it's the hardest position to play young because you're not developed. You know, you can have receivers and running backs because they're just kind of, you know, I make fun, they're just kind of running around. You know, if you don't get hit, you can't get hurt. So our left guard was a junior. He's about 5'11", 265. Our center was a senior, 3-year starter. He was kind of our leader. He was, you know, 5'10", 5'9", 260. Our right guard, probably my favorite player that I've coached yet. He was probably, you know, 5'10", about 215. He played some tight end and blocking back for us the previous years. Last year, before we won it, he played tackle, guard, and center. So he was kind of we call him a Swiss Army knife. Like he would play tackle, guard, center, and tight end all in one game. Just a great kid. Like I said, I can't say enough about him. I love him. And then
what year is he?
He was a senior.
Senior.
Yeah. So like I said, I was telling some kids, I was like, well, he was only 215, and then I quickly reminded him that he could also power clean like 330 and bench.
I was going to say he must be strong. And
yeah,
you're right. So, and your right tackle, what was his size?
He was probably about 6 foot, 260. And he was playing in the band 2 years ago holding a tuba. So
wow. Boy, you had to coach up this motley crew. That's awesome.
Yeah, like I said, we going into the season, going against our defense, which is very unconventional. Spring or summer ball and early fall camp was a hard time, you could say. And then like when we started going against some other teams that were more conventional defenses, you would say, it's a kind of a breath of fresh air that, you know, we can actually do something here.
You know, it's interesting that you say that when I interview members of the 81 state team and members of the 85 state team, they echo the same thing you just said. We look forward to the games because our defenses, ones-on-ones, was not fun for anybody. And those two teams featured some outstanding defensive players, and it just made your offenses better. That's for sure. I do want to welcome, speaking of outstanding players, Kevin Jackson has joined us. Hey, Kevin, good to see you, number 7. Outstanding Northview Cougar back in the day, and all SEC performer for Alabama. And also Judge Ingram has joined us. So thank you, Judge. It's good to see you as well. I'm talking with Coach Preston Hatcher, who's a 2010 graduate of Northview, 3-year starter, and he's now a 2021 newlywed and 6A title winner with Clay-Chalkville. He coaches the offensive line. Preston, what did you enjoy about growing up in Dothan? What was fun for you about Dothan?
I think it was like the fact that it's a bigger town, but you still knew everybody. Especially with our family, you know, you couldn't go anywhere without, you know, whether it be eating with my granddad, or like, hey, coach, you know, how's it going? And they leave like, you know, Daddy Bob, who's that? He was like, I don't know. Like sometimes he can't remember who everybody is. You know, the coach, and then my mom, you know, most of our family is in education. Like I said, just kind of knowing everybody. But I mean, you know, growing up, you know, playing pee-wee football, baseball, basketball, like I just, you know, I stayed busy playing sports. If I wasn't playing sports, I was driving, you know, with my dad 30, 40 minutes up to Eufaula or Clayton to go hunting. So I try to stay out of trouble, but like I said, Dothan was it's a good town. I think it's still growing. I read an article the other day that said that it was, you know, a lot of influx of people are still moving in there. I don't miss the circle traffic. I'll say that.
Who does?
Yeah, I said there's always some kind of construction going on when I go home.
Yeah.
So I usually try to travel. Like I said, I tell my parents, they're like, "Why do you leave so late?" Like I'll leave Birmingham at 7 or 8 at night and travel through the night just because I don't like being around a bunch of traffic. So
Yeah.
I enjoy Dothan, and sir.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
I was saying I enjoy Dothan, and like I said, hopefully, if there's an opportunity to coach there again, like I said, right now, it's not a good time for me. But like I said, you never say never.
Yeah. It always seems to me with construction in Dothan, it's either a bank, a church, or a barbecue restaurant.
That's right.
Something is going on. You mentioned something that really struck with me, and now, oh, where did you play rec ball growing up? What ward, what part of town, what rec center did you call home when you weren't playing sports in the neighborhood?
So I was Westgate is where I played football and baseball. I didn't pick up basketball until I was in middle school. Well, I played basketball like church leagues until I was in middle school and high school. I played a little bit in high school, but like I said, it was Westgate is where I spent a lot of time playing baseball and like I said, playing football for the city. So those were some fun years as well.
When you were in high school, 07, 8, 9, 10, that time period, the iPhone and social media were really starting to take off. They've been around for a little bit. How important were those things to you in high school compared to what you see now with the athletes who you're coaching and teaching? It's got to be just night and day.
Yeah, I had a flip phone basically till I got to college. Like the iPhones were kind of just getting popular.
Yeah.
I was never a big social media guy. I'm really not now. I get on there and kind of look around, but I don't, I try not to spend most of my time on there. I'd rather be either chilling with my dog or watching some type of sporting event. So yeah, nowadays it's if you don't post about it or do whatever, your workout, then you didn't work out. So it's the day and age of the Snapchats and the Facebooks and all that, it's taken another level almost each year, it feels like.
You mean you didn't build out your brand back in high school and share with your followers every meal you ate and all that good stuff?
No, I didn't do that. I'm sure somebody that started paying me, I may have had somebody either do it for me or I would have started, but no, that was definitely not a thing back then.
What about now? What about for the athletes that are on the UC in high school about wanting to build their brand, wanting to reach out? Because I'll give you one thing that I see quite often. When you see a college, one particular Power 5 coach tweet something, I doubt it's them unless it's Lane Kiffin. It's probably somebody on their staff. But as soon as they do, you'll see dozens of athletes tweet at them their stats and a link to maybe their huddle or wherever their highlights are. Whole new world. But my question is, and I guess it's the philosophy or the environment that your coach and your school each cultivates, but how important is that stuff to the guys that you coach right now?
We got some guys that, I told you we got a handful of guys that are going Power 5 from this year's team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess you really don't see, they'll do like they get offered, that's a big thing is like you want to post every time you get offered. So like sometimes like our social media team at the high school, they'll kind of do that for them, make like an edit or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as bad as at our school as it probably is at some others. We have a lot of 10th or upcoming juniors that are already been offered by Power 5 schools, with a couple of receivers, a running back, and a linebacker. So those guys are pretty level-headed, and that's kind of what we've been telling them for the past 2 weeks since we started back. It's like this is a brand new team. Like congratulations, you won, but like it's a there's no more Caleb Johnsons that are going to Louisville. There's no more Squirrels that are, running 4.3 going to Tennessee. There's has to be a new wave. And so we have some athletes, and we're probably a few just keep, pieces away from, kind of being back in our same scenarios this past year.
Well, and I know with the transfer portal on the college level, some people absolutely hate it. It's the worst thing ever. It's free agency, whatever. And then there are others, the more modern way of thinking. That's just the way it is now. Is there anything similar on the high school level that you guys have to deal with? Or does the Alabama High School Athletic Association have a pretty decent handle on how they deal with preventing stuff like that?
Bluntly, no. Kids, especially here, I did not know it was prevalent. I guess being, from Dothan Enterprise, like if you think about it, all the schools are 30, 45 minutes. Even the small schools, they're not close. You may have some kids go from like New Brockton Enterprise or from, Enterprise and New Brockton. But like, here it's, Penson's 5 miles from us, Hewitt Trussville's 2 miles from us.
Yeah.
Huffman's 6 miles from us, and then you go to the over mountain schools where you got Spain Park, Briarwood, Oak Mountain, all those schools. I mean, you can drive on one road and pass them all within 2 or 3 minutes. So moving up here, I saw and I've seen a lot more stories of kids like, they're at Hoover, now they're at Thompson, or they're at Oxford, and now they've even moved down to Auburn. So like you see a lot more. It's everything that's in high school or everything that's in college always trickles down. And even like, like there was a staff up here that just got fired, the whole staff. I mean, that's unheard of in high school ball. And like I said, when I was growing up, like you didn't fire a you fired a head coach, and he may get to bring in a handful of guys, but like you don't ever hear of a full staff getting fired. So like I said, it's kind of a monster that the colleges have created. Like I said, it's always going to trickle down.
And it's that same way on the field as well. The offenses that you guys are running now, they were running in colleges several years ago, et cetera, et cetera. It always trickles down that way, the good and the bad parts of the sport. We'll get you out of here in just a
funny thing is you say that is we got an offensive group text and for like our coaches, and they're our kids, a lot of film that we watch is Alabama, the Tampa Bay Bucks, Green Bay, the 49ers. That's where we get a lot of our ideas and different type of, whether it be bunch sets, formations, whatever we want to do. And it's funny as our kids, they'll see plays that Alabama run, and it's like, I thought y'all were good coaches. Are y'all just stealing plays and putting them in? So it's like you said, it's we run. I mean, like I said, my cousin came to watch me. He's like, well, "What do y'all do?" And I said, "Well, we can get in 10 personnel, which is one running back, no tight ends." Or I said we can get in 22 personnel, which is 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, and we can go 5 wide the next play. So we can do anything we want to. Like I said, in high school ball, you don't see that often. You usually don't have the kids. So we put in a lot of work to be able to do those things. We've already started working for next year, and it's been 5 days since we started back. So it's a never-ending grind if you want to be successful. That's for sure.
Preston, you're going to laugh at this. This is how the game evolves. In the 80s at Northview, we had wide receivers and running backs bringing in the plays. In the 90s, they started signaling in the plays. And during your time period, I don't know how y'all brought in or signaled plays, but now many high schools go to the signs and different methods. How do you guys signal in or bring in your next play from an offensive standpoint?
So we're signals. We have a running back coach that signals to his running backs. I signal to the O-line, kind of tight end, B-back, whoever's in the blocking scheme. Right. And then you have a receiver coach that kind of signals to the quarterback and the receiver. And then we have a coach that holds up a sign, and a lot of people think it's probably a play, but it's really our personnel cards.
Right.
So like if he holds up like a cheetah, for instance, well, that's going to be 4 or 5 fast dudes on the field. And then it may go to like a wolf or a tiger, which is kind of more of a 11 or 12 type of personnel that we'll use. So it's kind of a visual for them to say like, oh, I'm on the field or I'm not on the field, and then straight to my coach's eyes to kind of get the signal.
That's what's so great about the way you just described that. You've got 5 different coaches signaling into their groups, not just one player and then a dummy caller or a second dummy caller signaling in the play. That's how sophisticated high school has gotten. I can only imagine what middle school or junior high looks like these days. Probably just
yeah. So and I like it because you as a coach, you're getting the play in the headset. Like I said, some of ours are close to some NFL type. They're a couple we try to shorten as much as we can. We have a lot of formations and a lot of motions that we do. So like I said, there's a lot of deciphers as a coach. I'm sitting there, I'm listening to the call, and then as soon as I hear what I need to hear, I signal to the O-line. Like, so they don't even know, they know it's a pass or a run on how I signal. Sometimes they don't know that we're motioning. The quarterback may give them a verbal cue, but there's a lot of times that I can kind of control them as their own, like I said, their own unit on the field, and kind of take away a lot of other thinking that they would have to go through if we had it on an armband.
Preston, what is it about coaching that speaks to you? Why is it that you enjoy that so much?
I think it's the same reason that I played and loved it. It's you're going to win, you're going to lose. I mean, that's like I've been on a 2-8 team in Enterprise, and like I said, I've been on a 15-0 team now. So I've been on both ends of the lows and the highs. But I think the main thing is it's all about the kids. Being in the locker room before practice, after practice. Taking them out to dinner, having them over at the house. Just building relationships. With the coaches, with the players. So that's the biggest thing is, why I still enjoy it and why I still do it. It's not for the pay. It's the hours are awful, especially during the season. We got one day off on Saturday.
This isn't a 9 to 5, 38 hour a day. 38 hours a week job.
No, but I will say this. So our normal, how we do it during game week, we bring the kids in at like 6:30. We practice from 7 to 8:30. Then they go to school, and then they come back to us at 1:30, and at 3 o'clock, the kids go home.
Really? Is this a COVID schedule, or this is the way it's been?
Just the way it's always been. Great administration. They're all in for football, so we're on what we call it's 5 blocks.
Mm-hmm.
But that third one is a year-round class, so that's how they can get away with it. That first semester with them having 2 footballs, and I think everybody, if you want to be successful, like I said, you need as much time as you can with your kids. So that's how we kind of get away with it. They have the 2 football blocks, and they come. My first 2 years we did everything in the morning, and then the afternoon was your weights and your film. Go home. Those kids go home at 3. This past year we changed up a little bit and did like kind of our hard stuff in the morning, and then afternoon was like just team. We would go out and do 11-on-11 situational things. But that's how it's always been since I've been here. So that makes it better when you can at least get home before the sun goes down. You can eat. Obviously I would, like I said, I didn't think I'd like it at first. But I'm a morning person, so I'm more, like I said, let's get up, let's get the work done, let's be efficient. But that's just kind of they always done it at Clay. And then, like I said, now the kids just have one block of football. And I think the great thing about our schedule is we got 3 guys that are going Power 5, and they all graduated early. So I mean, it's an awesome schedule. Like I said, great principle. Kind of lets us do some things like that to kind of help our program.
We're going to get you out of here in just a minute, Preston, but I want to get your take on why is the sport of football important? What does it teach us or teach you in life that translates to everyday life?
I think the main thing, and it's kind of what I've always told myself and, you know, told the kids I coach is like, you know, football is like you in the grand scheme of things, like you're nothing. And I don't mean to say that like, you know, like in a bad way. It's like, okay, if I get fired or you quit, like the next day, the team is still going to go on without you. You know, having that in your mind, like, football's bigger than just myself. I'm doing it for the people that play before me, who come after me, for my family, for the guys that are, you know, in beside me. So like I said, it's the ultimate team sport. Like I said, I don't think there's anything better than you know, American football as far as a team game. Like I said, that's kind of the biggest thing that kind of draws me is like, you know, it's bigger than just football. Like I said, you are kind of representing your, you know, your family and your school, but also like if you leave or somebody leaves, like, you know, it goes on without you. So it's kind of gives you a little taste of reality that, you know, if you're not doing your job at, you know, the highest, like, you know, if you're going to get fired and that company or that business or wherever you work, like they're just going to get somebody to try to replace you that does just as good or even better. So kind of, you know, it teaches you a lot of life lessons without you even as a young kid kind of knowing what's really going on. But you really appreciate them later in life.
So well said. Once a Cougar, always a Cougar, and now still a Cougar.
That's right.
Preston Hatcher joined us this evening. I really appreciate your perspective. I really appreciate you spending some time and sharing your story. We didn't even get to talk much about Jacksonville State, the OVC Championship, and that experience. We may have to bring you back this time next year when you've got your second title, 6A, with Clay-Chalkville. So Preston, thank you for spending some time with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I keep up doing the good work. Like I said, you started a couple of years ago, but this is, like I said, it's a cool experience for people to come back, give some stories, and just kind of network as well. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And most of the stories that get told each Wednesday night or have some half truths in there. So we just kind of weave our way through there and figure out what's true. Is it true that the biggest crowd you ever played for at Rip Hughes was somewhere about 63,000 people crammed in there for that Dothan High game your senior year? Something
probably,
like that.
Yeah, I'd say probably so.
Yeah, I think ESPN carried it. Maybe all the major networks carried it. At least as time goes on, in our mind's eye, that's how big it was.
Yeah.
But Preston, again, thank you, bud, for spending some time with us this evening on Conversations with Cougars. And guys, Preston is exactly why I love doing these shows each week. Different ages, different generations, different graduation years, but all Cougars from Northview. So thank you for coming each. We had a whole bunch of folks roll in tonight. Appreciate the support, the questions, the contributions. And we'll be back next Wednesday night at 7:00 with our next installment of Conversations with Cougars. Hope you guys have a safe week and have a good weekend. Take care.
Yes, sir.